Hey there, pen fans. Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, back for another Q&A, number 269. This week talking about Arco pens, stacked nibs, and Myers-Briggs, of all things. So I hope you enjoyed this one. I took off last week because I was out of town. I actually didn't really give much of a heads up that I was going to be out of town. But yeah, I went to tour Aurora and Monte Grappa with our distributor Kenro. And they're very gracious hosts, both Kenro and Aurora and Monte Grappa respectively. Really cool. So I'd been to Italy before in like the central and southern parts like Florence and Naples, but I'd never been to northern Italy. So now I feel like I've been told that Italy's like 3 different countries based on those regions. So now I guess I've seen all of Italy, or at least most of it. Most of it relevant to the pen world. So that was really, really cool. Drew and I talked about some of the details in Right Now on Wednesday, and we're going to follow up with more footage to come. We just have to go through it all, and then you know, they showed us like full stop the factories inside and all that, so we just want to be respectful of anything proprietary we may have shot, so I can't really show it yet, but it was pretty cool. Ate a lot of good food, had a lot of coffee, because I did not sleep well on the plane, so I was drinking coffee like it was my job. Probably because to do my job, I needed that coffee, but anyway, I had a lot of products that came in here. Rachel was a champ. You know, kids were good, so you know, Rachel's often stays home on these trips while I travel. I travel generally pretty well. It's a little tougher on Rachel, and especially with the kids and stuff, it's a lot to coordinate. So she stayed back on this one. Drew came with me, and it worked out really well. We had a lot that happened while I was out, though. We launched the Dian ink vent calendar, which, as of the shooting of this video on Wednesday, we still have a few, which I'm kind of shocked because honestly, the email notification list was very high, and it's like a one-shot deal. So if you are interested in that ink vent calendar, go ahead and jump on it because I don't believe we're going to get restocked. It's possible, but I doubt it. Especially for like something like this, it's very timely, so I don't think they made more than they thought that they could sell. We had the TWSBI Eco Transparent Purple launch, which looks awesome, like really awesome purple. I'm very happy with how this turned out, as is Rachel. She kept one for herself because purple's definitely her jam. That's pretty cool. You can check those out. We're getting kind of some restocks of some of those because I know some sold through pretty quick. We also have some closeouts on Diplomat Esteem, which is not like a, you know, hugely crazy pen for us here, but this was a pen that they made probably 10 years ago, 3 different colors actually. So there's the olive here, and then there's a black granite and a blue granite. We had the opportunity to kind of pick these up. They're not making them anymore. They just had some kind of left over in their factory, and we got kind of a first grab at them. So we have them. They're a reduced price over the normal Esteem. Perfectly good pens, just basically new old stock. So if you're interested in those, go check them out. We also got in a Retro 51 Popper, the Creepy Scrawlers. Very fun pen, glow in the dark. Lots of cool things going on with this pen, so if you're into that, go check it out. We have some Lamy Bronze gift sets, the All-Star Bronze gift sets that comes with ink and converter and stuff like that, so that's kind of cool in a nice little packaged box. So we've often done that in the holidays. It's always a bit to coordinate, but we did get some of those for right now, so yes, that happened. We also have the Pelican M600 Custom Grinds. So we are working with Gina Salarino from Custom Nib Studio. This is now the 2nd nib collaboration we've been able to do. We've done some with Visconti, with Mark Bacchus, that have been very well received, and we're continuing to do that. Absolutely nothing going wrong there. We just also wanted to work with Gina. Gina's got a lot of experience with Pelican and other brands. She's got about 4 years of grinding experience full time, so you know, she does some amazing work, and we had the opportunity to do a super fine cursive italic, medium cursive italic, and an architect on a broad nib with her. So if you're interested in those, if you've been curious, I know, you know, maybe the purple M600 is not necessarily your jam. That's literally just the pens that we had in stock to be able to do those nib grinds on. So we're going to see kind of what everybody thinks, see how well they're received, and then go from there. But Gina's a great person, does really good grinds, and we are excited to have those available now with some grinds that we just wouldn't have otherwise. I've got some new field notes in, the Field Notes Trilogy. So this is an off-white paper, got these kind of fall colors, red, yellow, orange, gold staples, lined paper. You know, it's the seasonal Field Notes always a good time. But those we just got in. We got in the Montegrappa Amarallo. That is turtle brown, not the one I'm showing here. This is a charcoal, which I selfishly kept for myself because as I was touring Montegrappa and I realized just how special the relationship was with Montegrappa and Sailor on the collaboration for this Amarallo, I was like, I need to keep this for historical reference. So I kept a zoom nib, which we did not have many of. That is a special Sailor nib. And yeah, I'm kind of selfish for taking that one, but I just felt like I needed to have it as a pen reviewer, right? The easy justification I can have for just about anything. But anyway, couldn't resist. We did launch a video while I was out last week about the Platinum 37-76 Carnelian, which will be coming in November, so you gotta wait a little bit, but we did get to see it at least ahead of time and put a little video out there for you. So that is gonna be a US exclusive 37-76. So the color looks pretty cool. It's this nice amber kind of orange color with some sparkles in it, which is pretty neat. So, you know, go ahead and sign up for the email notification list if you're interested in that one. As far as I know, it's not like a one-shot deal or anything. It'll be available kind of ongoing, though I have no idea what quantities and stuff like that. So I would anticipate that we'll probably have it, but with these things, you just never know how it goes. And then the last thing, I've just gotten some updates recently around the team that Galen Leather is kind of, you know, on its way. So I know a lot of you have been waiting for that. So I think it's maybe just around the corner there. So you may not have to wait too long before that's available. Again, email notification is your friend on our site. Cool. All right, so let's get into the questions that we have for this week. Some pen and writing questions. Starting out with Dalston Dahl on Twitter. Okay, what's an Arco pen? I know lots of companies make them. Is it a color, a style, or a material? Okay, it's a great question. There's been a lot of buzz about Arco, especially on Instagram and various pen forums and stuff like that. And it's interesting, anybody who's been around in the pen world for a little while, you may have seen Arco pens for some time, and you're like, all of a sudden, why does everybody care about Arco? That's a nice looking, it's a material, right? So, you know, I don't know that it's like a trademarked proprietary name, Arco necessarily, which is why I think maybe there is some confusion because there are a few different Arco products out there. The one that I have here is from Peniter. So Peniter has a pen that they called the Arco. It's really because it's got this Arco material. So this is actually the same body that they have on other pens. So it's the same nib that they use for their, I'm completely blanking on the name. Oh gosh. Anyway. It's the same, you know, general shape as what they have in kind of the mystery filler. So they've adapted this pen a little bit. This one is a piston fill. But the Arco is really referring to the material. Grande Bellezza, that's the name of the pen. Should know that off the top of my head. Anyway, that's Peniter's general Grande Bellezza. So it's sort of like that, but this one has an ink window. So it's a little kind of a hybrid between the mystery filler and the Arco and the Grande Bellezza. Anyway, so this material, though, is really kind of the Arco. So Arco, I think, generally refers to a layered kind of, you know, turtle brown or tobacco kind of color with some pearlescence in it. So this one you can see here, it's got layers on it and some pearlescence when you look at it from one angle. So I think that's, it's a throwback to some other Arco materials that have been around there. Most popularized, I think, by Omos, right? Which Omos is no longer in business, has not been that way for the last 4 or 5 years, and they had a celluloid that was called Arco. So that I think was, I don't know if they were the original ones to come up with it. That is where I first came to know about Arco. And it's funny because at the time, Arco, like, it was a nice material, and, you know, talking to, you know, Ken Rowe, I actually just talked to him about this on the trip to Italy because they were the distributor for Omos. you know, when they disappeared. And they said that, you know, when the Arco came out, like, it was popular. It's a very nice material, but it wasn't like this legendary kind of status material like it has been known to be. And I kind of liken that to, like, you know, maybe about 10 years ago, everybody was talking about Parker Penman Sapphire ink. Like, that was just known as, like, oh my gosh, it's so revered. When at the time, like, it was sort of popular, but not really. It was like, that ink was popular in the 90s, or it was made in the 90s, early 90s. But then just, you know, two decades later, it became known as like this thing that everybody had to have, but no one could get. So I do think there's a little bit of that mystique around it, around the Arco. But from my understanding, when OMOS went under, they still had some of that Arco material through whatever means. It was acquired by the company that's Armando Simoni Club. So they're a very, very small manufacturer, but they are popular amongst some inner circles, especially on Instagram and like pen show community and stuff like that. So I've definitely seen some people with these Arco pens, and they are using the same, from what I understand, the same rod stock that OMOS had. I don't believe that this Arco material is made anymore because from talking to several different manufacturers who used to use celluloid, Monograppa being the most recent, because I literally saw their room and their ovens where they treat their celluloid, they can't get it anymore. So due to whatever environmental regulations or whatever just strategic decisions that the companies that were making these celluloids, the cellulose nitrate that original Arco material was, is actually kind of a hazardous material to manufacture. It's very complicated to work with. It's hazardous to store. Numerous pen factories in days of old actually had like warehouse fires and stuff like that started from their celluloid material. So it's the same stuff that's made out of like the green visors that you know, bankers used back in the day. It was the same thing that they used to make nitrocellulose film. You know, so like old film reels used to be made out of that very flammable material. And ping pong balls actually are one of the most popular modern cellulose nitrate materials. You know, but there are some pen materials, you know, like Montegrappa has a decent stock still of them, and like the Amiralia, for example, this is cellulose nitrate. Now, in its finished pen form, it's not like this thing is going to burst into flames. It's more when you're working with it and when you're manufacturing it. But it also takes like 2 years to make this material before you can even use it in a pen. So it's very expensive, very hazardous, kind of impractical. So for all these reasons, they're not really being made anymore in pens. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see fewer and fewer pens made out of this celluloid, and you're going to see you know, the prices go up because they're only going to be used on limited editions and really nice things because there's just not any material left. So that's what Arco is. So I think that's why Peniter, you know, they can't acquire a cellulose nitrate Arco like people ask about or are curious about, but Dante layered up his own resin to kind of emulate that Arco style that people are kind of known, you know, asking about. So that's my understanding of it. I don't think there's like a strict definition of what Arco means. I think it's kind of open to interpretation, but I think generally speaking, it's referring to that one type of celluloid that was made famous by OMOS. All right, Dian T on Facebook. Recently, I watched some videos on pens. Shocking. And I came across someone using what looked to be stacked nibs. What is the purpose of stacking nibs, and is it something worth pursuing? So this is something that I think really has been popularized by Sailor. They have really been the ones to get this process done. It was really major innovation done by Mr. Nagahara and his son, designing many different layered nibs. So if you just kind of Google, I know Nibs.com has a great layout of a lot of the different Sailor specialty nibs. You can see them with some explanations as to what they do. But the basic principle is when you layer a bunch of nibs on top of each other, you can get increased flow with just much more tipping material to work with to make some very interesting kind of specialty shapes. Now, in all practicality, it's not something that's going to have a lot of mass appeal because the uses for some of these stack nibs is going to be very, very specific. But it's certainly interesting and has a high level of craftsmanship and artisanal kind of interest to it. And one of the more modern people that you probably maybe have seen, maybe you've seen some of Sailor's stuff, but also Ralph Reyes, Regalia Writing Labs, has been experimenting and very much inspired by Mr. Nagahara and Sailor's work that they've done. But he has been doing his own nib layering, and I actually have one of his nibs here because I was one of the lucky few to be at a pen show. This was San Francisco last year, and I caught Ralph before he sold out of all his nibs because he always sells out. And I got one for myself. So I have one of Ralph's. This one is called the Epilogue. So this one in particular, I'll try and get you a little close up. This one, it is a stacked nib. So this is a triple nib, and it is ground in such a way to where it writes basically an extra fine conventionally, and then when you flip it upside down, it's like quadruple broad, super, super, super wet. So it's really interesting, and honestly, if you write with it very upright on the reverse side, you can write more fine, and then when you write down, it can be fatter. So you can do some really interesting kind of writing with it, depending on how you're doing it. Honestly, I don't use this on a regular basis, but I bought this because I really wanted to support Ralph, and I thought that it was really cool, and just for something really interesting to talk about, such as this Q&A question, I like to have stuff like this on hand. So that's why I picked it up, and I love nibs and I love pens, and I just, like to have a nice variety of everything. The more I know, the better it is for everybody. So, I think the main purpose of stacking in general is for twofold: to get that larger tipping area, you can get some of those dramatic shapes, and it also just gets you a wetter, wider line than you can do. Ralph has done some really just kind of innovative and crazy stuff, but it's difficult. It's tons of handwork, high reject rate. In fact, this is just a steel nib. This wasn't even gold. I think Ralph told me when he made this particular nib, he wasted 26 different attempts before this one finally worked. Now, this was earlier in his process. Maybe he's refined that, but from what I understand, this is very difficult to make, and so it ends up being very expensive. So it's not going to be for everybody. In all practicality, if you want to get different writing experiences, you could probably just buy multiple pens and then use them, but it's one of these niche kind of cool things to have. So I think if there's an appeal for you, just aesthetically or artisanally wanting to support someone who's doing something innovative, or you happen to have this very specific need where you're like, in one pen I need to write extra fine and then write really broad. Maybe you're an artist and that just really appeals to you, or something like that, or you just want to have something brag-worthy when you go to a pen meetup. Then I think, yes, maybe it could be worth pursuing. But the truth is, you're gonna have a very hard time tracking any of these layered nibs down. Like the Sailor King Eagle nib is talked about a bit. It is extremely difficult to find one of those anywhere because people just do not let them go. They don't really make them much, and it's really kind of more of a novelty. But if you're determined enough, if you like kind of chasing a white whale, so to speak, and you really want to chase after some of these stacked nibs, by all means. Now you at least know a little bit more of what they're all about. All right, but it's definitely not something that we're going to be able to stock regularly anytime soon. All right, Osman Kandatar on Instagram. Why are the extra fine nib fountain pens more expensive than the same medium nib fountain pens? Okay, so it's not always the case that a lot of pen companies just standardize, especially their conventional nib sizes. Maybe if there's something that's kind of special, like a soft nib or a flex nib or something like that, there could be a premium. But most of them will keep them consistent, but there are some brands that their extra fine is just a little more expensive, especially if you're in the lower price range. Then there tends to be more of a delineation, perhaps, between an extra fine and the rest of the, I'll call them conventional nib sizes. Some of this, I think, largely has to do with, supply and demand. So I think in recent years, I think that the demand for extra fine nibs has grown, especially due to increased fountain pen, interest in China. I know that's been the case with several different manufacturers that we've worked with. Sometimes we've had a hard time just getting extra fine nibs because the Chinese market really is loving these extra fine nibs, and because of the way they write and the language and the characters and stuff, they really need those extra fine nibs. They really can't use something, they can't use a broad like at all. Whereas, our more Western languages, we have a lot more flexibility in terms of which nib size we can use. It's more of a preferential thing. So I know a lot of those companies who are growing massively in those Chinese markets, sometimes all the demand kind of gets absorbed from there. So there could be some of that maybe going on. But that's completely speculative on my part. I think more confirming reality here in terms of actually manufacturing these nibs. Extra fine nibs are a little tougher to make, especially to make well. To make a smooth writing, consistent writing extra fine nib, it just requires, there's a higher reject rate because there's just not as much tolerance. There's not as much give, not as much forgiveness when you go finer and finer and finer in these nibs. So for that reason, I think some manufacturers just need to, in practicality, charge a little bit more for their extra fines because it's just more expensive to make. Maybe it requires a little handwork to tune them, whereas some of the other nibs may not need that. Or, maybe it's screwed up a little bit more and there's more waste and they have to kind of make up for that. Or it could just be that as there's been maybe a rise in extra fines, there have been fewer of them, so supply and demand dictates they charge a couple dollars more because they just have to invest in more machinery or more equipment or more capacity to be able to make these extra fine nibs. Any of these could be at play here, but I think that may be why you see that some of it happen sometimes. All right, Lorenz Frame on Twitter. I tend to daub a tiny bit of silicone grease on all threads in all pens. Is that a bad idea? And are there materials that react badly to silicone grease? What about Vaseline or petroleum jelly? Is it a safe alternative to silicone grease in all cases, in some cases, or in no cases? Okay, this is a multi-question Q&A question. So silicone grease, I'll talk about that first. We sell silicone grease. It's 100% food grade, very high industrial grade stuff. We buy it in large quantities, get it down to a reasonable volume for you, and then we sell it. So we know it's good stuff. Never really had an issue in the years and years and years that we've been selling it. Tested on a whole bunch of our stuff, never seen a reaction ourselves. So feel very confident that you're not going to have any problems with silicone grease for pretty much whatever you're using it. Sometimes, really silicone grease, it's a lubricant, it's a sealant, and in industrial applications, this stuff is made to be a kind of a lubricant for, metal parts in like food grade equipment and things like that, where you don't want to have some other type of grease that will either liquefy or drop into your food and be hazardous, whatever. This is relatively inert. It's silica, it's silicone, it's pretty harmless stuff to pens and otherwise. You're getting on your fingers, it's not really going to do anything for you. So it's really pretty good for pens. It's particularly great for greasing pistons, for greasing various other mechanisms, anything where there's dissimilar materials too, and threads like pen threads, very legitimate. You can use it to eyedropper convert pens, or you can just use it to make your pen threads feel a little smoother. You don't need a lot of it. If it's just a regular pen thread that you have, I'm trying to find a threaded pen, TWSBI Eco, right? So this pen, it's got threads here on the cap. So this is a pretty smooth thread, but if you wanted to put just a little bit of silicone grease on here, the cap will thread just a little bit smoother. Sometimes, depending on the manufacturer, depending on, if you have a certain vintage pen or whatever, maybe your cap is a little squeaky, maybe it's a little tight, and you wanted to smooth it a little bit, silicone grease on the threads can do a great job. And if you're doing that on every pen, that's a preferential thing. More power to you. I don't think you're going to see any issue from that, except maybe if you put too much grease on the threads and you're touching it with your fingers, you might get a little grease on your fingers every now and then, but it's not really going to hurt anything. So I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's purely a matter of preference if you want to do that. And I don't know of any materials that react badly to silicone grease. That's why it's such a great material for pens. Now you asked me about Vaseline and petroleum jelly. So that I can talk about. Is that a safe alternative to silicone grease in all cases or whatnot? So I did a little research actually, because I've kind of heard you know, that some people maybe use Vaseline as an alternative to silicone grease. It certainly feels like a similar type of material, and it's very widely available. You probably have some in your house right now. You know, and it's interesting. I did some research and found some articles about the history of Vaseline and petroleum jelly and where it came from. So basically, it's a byproduct from the oil rigging, you know, process. So the things they use to lubricate, like the drills and stuff like that, they end up having this kind of like gunk buildup that happens, and it was kind of greasy. And so the oil riggers and stuff would use it to like rub on their cuts and stuff like that, and they were like, oh, this is not so bad. So it's a good barrier. It's a good physical barrier. But of course, the stuff that's the petroleum jelly, it's much more refined than the stuff that they were using back in like the late 1800s when the stuff was first discovered, which was literally like black grease that they were like rubbing on their wounds. You know, so it kind of became more refined, which is why it looks more clear. It's got that little yellowish tint, but it's still a petroleum byproduct. So, you know, it is possible that there could be some unrefined things in there in some of these petroleum jellies, and certainly it is going to be petroleum based, which means that there is certainly a potential for there to be a reaction, especially with other natural materials like rubber. And rubber on pens is used in O-rings. It's used in ebonite feeds. It could be on ebonite pens. Other natural materials like casein and maybe celluloids could certainly probably have more of a reaction with a petroleum jelly than you would with a silicone grease. So if you're asking me if it's a safe alternative, I would have to say no, because it's going to depend. You know, I've definitely seen some articles and stuff of people that have used Vaseline in lieu of silicone grease, and it has caused them some problems, not just in terms of discoloration, or it can actually like melt and kind of gum up rubber parts, which is definitely not good and not something you want. But another issue you can have is petroleum jelly will actually kind of melt when it's heated. So if you're holding it in your hand, or if you're keeping it in your pocket or something like that, then you could end up having it kind of seeping out of your threads. If you eyedropper convert it, the grease could get into your ink, which could then go into your feed and stuff, or it could actually just like leach out of the threads, and then your ink could leak out of the threads. You know, and just none of that's good. None of that's desirable. So you can certainly look to get that. We sell silicone grease, but I'm not trying to like hard sell you on silicone grease. Here, you can buy silicone grease elsewhere. I think like the plumbing sections of some, you know, like home improvement stores often have it. I know Scuba, you know, like equipment suppliers will often have it too. Maybe some other like industrial type applications you can find this stuff, but you're gonna have to buy it in pretty decent quantity, which is why we like to provide it, because it's very practical, especially if you're already shopping with us. Go ahead and just pick up some, and you know, the little tube that we sell is, you know, let's see if I've got it handy, but that's gonna last you a good long while. Okay, I can't find it, but anyway, you can see on our website. It's, you know, a little thing about this big, and it's gonna last you quite a while. So, so bottom line, yes, I think if you're using petroleum jelly, it technically can work in a pinch, but it's really not the best tool for the job, and it is certainly not a out-and-out replacement for silicone grease. So silicone grease really is going to be the way to go to do the job that you're looking to do for your pens. Cool. All right, got a couple of business questions here. This is from Brad the Bear 1 on Instagram. How does Goulet handle its own QC, quality control, when it comes to stuff like their JoWo Goulet nibs? Okay, stuff like our nibs. We carry our nibs. We don't really carry anything else like our nibs. So I'm going to kind of talk about the nibs, and I'll talk about other things. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. Like anything in manufacturing or quality checking, the QC methods are going to vary based on what the product actually is. Nibs are very different because we don't actually manufacture the nibs. JoWo manufactures the nibs. We're really just ensuring that the quality is good enough to kind of have our name on it, right? You know, just like you would have with anything else that you put our name on. We have our name on several other things. Some things we are more involved in the manufacturing process, like our pen flush, our brass sheets, micro mesh sheets, and stuff like that. Some of it we're actually like cutting and, you know, handling and packaging and things like that. The nibs, essentially we get them from JoWo, we're just making sure that they look good, and then we're sending them out, you know, so we're buying them and we're paying, you know, we're paying a higher price for that than we would if we manufactured something on our own, because they're doing a lot of that quality checking there at JoWo. So originally when we first started doing JoWo nibs, we did a completely insane quality check because it was kind of an unknown for us, and it was one of the first products that we put our name on, and we took that very seriously, and it's like, these are nibs, these are the working part of the pen, it's got to be good if it's going to have our name on it. So we literally checked every single nib for the first several shipments, and I'm talking these are pretty sizable shipments with a good number of nibs that we had to make at first, and we checked through every single one. I'm talking loop, you know, inspecting. You did brass sheets through the tines, checked it on paper, the whole works. I mean, I'm sure we lost money on the first couple batches of nibs because of how much labor we put into checking them, because we just wanted to ensure that the quality was going to be on par. Now we don't go through quite as exhaustive as a process. We're more in like a spot checking kind of scenario because the quality has been so consistent and so good. We love JoWo, and that's part of why, is because they provide a very, very consistent product. So for that, that's more what it looks like. It's more of a spot check, and we do package every single nib, so we are, you know, to a degree visually checking these things. It's not like we're looking through a loop on every single nib. We are more spot checking them these days, but that's because we've done that work and they've earned our trust in that way. You know, other things we might be much more involved if it's like something that we're more manufacturing from scratch, and we have different processes in place for different things, you know, depending on what it is. But yeah, basically that's largely what's going on. You know, we'll order raw materials, and we'll check the quality of those to make sure that they're consistent, because basically every batch of something that we buy, say it's silicone grease, right? We're not manufacturing silicone grease, we're buying silicone grease in large volume, we are dispensing it and then providing it to you in a smaller volume. Kind of the same thing like we do with our ink samples, right? So we are checking as we are kind of repackaging the stuff to ensure that the quality is good. Each batch that we receive, you know, we make sure that it's the product that it should be. You know, but we're not like having to run quality checks, quality tests on every single product as it goes out, because we're making it in large batches. So, you know, nibs are something a little different, because you can't just like, you know, in the initial manufacturing process, you can't just like check one nib and assume they're all great, because machines wear down, you know, calibration can get out of whack, so you got to check things much more regularly. And some of the major manufacturers, like Lamy, for example, I have the Lamy How It's Made video. You can see some of the machinery in there. I mean, they use like laser machinery scanning equipment that will check, you know, the spacing and stuff on every single nib that goes through that place. So manufacturers that are actually making things like nibs, they are more set up for checking that kind of stuff than we are. But for our own, we have our own inspection process that we feel very comfortable with. Yeah, so that's about how it works. All right, Ashley W on Facebook. Every time I figure out what ink I want, it's out of stock on your site. Is there a best time of the week or month to shop on gouletpens.com for maximum availability of products for those of us who struggle with picking a color? Every time? Dang it. I'm really sorry. That's just really bad timing. You know, we have about 700 or so colors right now across, just doing a check, 19 different ink brands. And we have ink that's kind of coming and going constantly, basically on a daily basis. Not every brand we're getting in daily, but, you know, stuff is selling. We're getting shipments in, and it's kind of a moving target. You can imagine 700 different products. How difficult that is to time it so that we always have everything in stock. Even when we try to order certain things, we get back ordered, shipments break in transit. It's a real challenge. And even still, you know, as a retailer, it can be very challenging for us to try to stock everything in stock all the time, because we'll get a run on something because somebody will do a video or a blog post, and then, you know, something that for 2 years we've sold 2 bottles a year, and then all of a sudden somebody does a blog post, those 2 bottles sell out immediately, and the distributor or the manufacturer doesn't even have any more because it's so unpopular. It just rises in popularity all of a sudden. You know, so it's like stuff like that happening, that it takes like 8 weeks to maybe get more, and then by then, you know, people have moved on into other things, and then we're sitting here with like 40 bottles when we've only been selling 2 a year. So it can be a real challenge to try to hit the mark on every single ink. Some things are very regular and they sell consistently and we keep really high stock and it's almost never a problem. Other things, it's much more hit and miss. It's a real challenge to try and thread that needle. So, I would say there isn't really like a best time, unless maybe something's been out of stock, you sign up for the email notification, you get an email saying, hey, it's back in stock, or you happen to notice the website, hey, it's back in stock. That's the best time, when you see it in stock, because then it could sell out again quickly, or who knows how many people have signed up for it. What can happen sometimes is there's something that we have 2 bottles in stock of, sells out immediately because whatever, it becomes popular for whatever reason. 28 people sign up on the email notification list. We restock 2, because that's our normal reorder point based on several whatever length of time history. But when there's something that pops like that, maybe we don't notice, on any one given ink color. We try to be on top of these things, but it's really tough sometimes. If one thing, there's a run on it, and 28 people sign up, we've already ordered more, but it's not nearly going to be enough. Maybe we ordered 5 or 10, but 28 people sign up. We restock, say it's 10, and then 4 hours later, it's all bought. And then it's like, what the heck? What do we do? Do we order 40? After that, who knows? Because it could be a whim, and then, everybody could just scatter and either buy it elsewhere or lose interest and buy some other color that's really close. It's really tough. It's really tough for us to try to keep that in stock. So again, the best time is when you see it in stock, especially if it's been out of stock and you want it and you see it come back in. Move quick. That said, we are closed on the weekends. So if you are looking to order something maybe closer to a Sunday or like an early Monday morning, that's probably going to be less in stock because we haven't been working during the week we haven't been working throughout the weekend putting things in stock. So we're going to be a little more depleted by the time, we try to keep good stock so that we don't run out of things on the weekends. But if we were low and we happen to run out, it's more likely to be out on a late Sunday night or early Monday morning than it would be on, say, a Wednesday. Once Monday rolls around, we start to get shipments back in, and then we're putting stuff back in stock. So, Monday through Friday, we're going to have much more regular putting things in stock. The weekend will have a little bit of a gap as well. But orders keep coming in through the whole weekend because our store never technically closes. Some of it can be really tough. We try to keep these accurate stock levels. It is a moving target, and some brands, like Dian T, for example, they hand make everything. There's no U.S. distributor. We have to buy direct from Germany. So it literally can take, depending on what kind of order we place with them, it can take 3 or 4 months to get restocked on something. So if there's a run on a particular color of Dian T, it's like, dang it. It's going to be months before we get it restocked, and then it's almost certainly not going to be still in high demand. So it's always a roll of the dice for us to see how that's going to do. That's kind of the best advice I have is look for things throughout the week, act on things quickly, and then just ask us. What really helps, not only when we see a higher email notification list, that's an indicator, it's a numerical number, we can pull reports and we can see we have 4,700 SKUs or somewhere thereabouts. So you can just imagine what it's like for us dealing with maybe 60 different vendors with 4,700 different products, what it's like on a daily basis to know not only what we should order based on what stock level is low, but what demand there may be that we're not able to meet. It's really tough. I literally have like several people in our company whose job is basically that. Our whole inventory team, that's pretty much what they're doing every day. So it is a bit of a challenge, but the more you communicate with us and the more you let our customer care team know, or you're commenting on YouTube or whoever it may be, the more you let us know specifically what it is you're looking for, that can be really helpful, because then we may know, okay, we're getting so many questions about this one random color, why? And you let us know and say, hey, I saw this, there's a video that somebody posted that's really popular, and it really piqued my interest. That gives us a clue to, oh, okay, maybe there's a reason why there's an increase in demand in this. Maybe we'll place a larger than normal order so that we can actually have it back in stock. So we really love to communicate with you all like that, on even like a per product basis like that. So things like that always help. But it is complicated. All right, and my final question for this week is Kitty Cat Kate Loves Espresso on Instagram. Love your handle there, Kitty Cat Kate. So, hi everyone at Goulet. I'm a small business owner, a specialty coffee roastery, And I find, I'm not sure I believe you, I may need to sample some of your product, I'm just kidding. And I, specialty coffee roastery, and I find that my Myers-Briggs personality type has a lot to do with how I interact with my employees and solve conflicts. I'm an INFP, a mediator who listens to everyone. I just saw the 8-month-old video where Brian asks everyone what pen and ink they are using, and it made me wonder, Brian and Rachel, what are your Myers-Briggs personality types, and how do they affect your leadership style? So this is very interesting. I love personality tests. You'll see when I talk about my own Myers-Briggs, I am all about self-improvement. And so I love this type of things because I love to learn about myself and how I can be better and about others and how I can improve relationships and stuff. So for shorthand, I'm going to call it MBTI. That stands for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. So this was really something huge in business, maybe 10, 15 years ago, maybe even longer, that, it was kind of all the rage. I don't know that it's quite as in vogue anymore. There's a lot of different personality types out there. There's the DISC, there's Strengths Finders, there's Enneagram, there's Myers-Briggs, there's a host of other ones. Those are just 4 that I've done myself. Basically the bottom line is you want to understand yourself, call it a personality style, call it maybe a communication style or just a communication preference. And then the better you understand how maybe that differs from other people who you are working with, the better off that's going to be. So we have done some training specifically with our leadership team here on Myers-Briggs. We have used DISC personality profile. We use that in our interview process. DISC is only 4 character traits, the DISC. It's a little bit more consumable than the 16 different types of Myers-Briggs. Because Myers-Briggs, you have 4 different characters, and which can be one of 2. So there's 16 different combinations, and it's a little bit difficult. Like for me, as I'm walking through our building, we have close to 40 people. I can't recall which of the 16 any of the 40 people may have enough to be able to engage with them in a conversation in such a way. But in a situation, if you're maybe on a smaller team or you're working with somebody more intimately, you can have good conversations with each other, especially if there's some sort of conflict that's happening. You can talk about, well, here is how I approach conflict because I'm a blah, 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 INFP. And somebody else can say, well, I'm a blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, I had no idea that you saw the world that way. And it can be a good point of conversation. So I'm all about that. And in fact, if you're interested in Myers-Briggs type stuff, I have no affiliation with this site, but it is a pretty decent site. Go to 16personalities.com. So 16personalities.com. So it's a Myers-Briggs type site, but it's very modernized and it's got a lot of nice plain speak summaries of certain things, and it even gives like the mediator designation for each of the personality types. So it's just a little easier to kind of grab onto. If I can remember that somebody's the mediator, that might be easier than remembering you're an IFTPJ. Which one were you again? FTP, I get them confused with like various other acronyms because there's a lot of them floating around there in the world. Languages of appreciation. That's another thing that we do here. There's a lot of different things out there. So you're asking specifically about what are Rachel and I. So I am an ENTP. So I am the debater, right? So my personality style is such that I'm going to often question others. In fact, I will even challenge myself just because I think it's fun and interesting to think of 2 sides of the same issue. This can be incredibly annoying for some people, especially people who see the world kind of a little more black and white. I can often be kind of an agent of chaos in these people's worlds. Me personally, I am more about like exploring options and kind of bringing out the best ideas. So I will often dig and challenge and get into things, which also means I'm maybe a little more creative, but I'm also a bit more verbose, maybe not so concise, not so good with my time management and personal organization and such things, as is evidenced by 269 different Q&As. I actually do organize these pretty well, but I go way off script and I run way too long on every single one. And I often talk, you can probably witness, you're probably like, oh yeah, he's totally a debater. He's debating both sides of, see, I literally just debated myself right now. I was talking about how I'm not concise and not prepared, and then in fact, I was talking about how much I do actually prepare. These are just the inner thoughts of my head. So I am the debater, though. Big picture oriented, very risk tolerant, risk seeking, perhaps even. Procrastinator, bit disorganized, but very energetic, fun, and self improvement oriented. So that's me. Rachel, she's an ISTJ, so she is known as the logistician, right? If you know Rachel at all, makes perfect sense. So she's the one who manages details, keeps the wheels on the bus, in my life especially. So she's very organized, structured, very honest, very straight communicator, productive, and very fact-driven. That is Rachel to a T. So Rachel and I end up making up actually a pretty dynamic team because I am very much kind of the visionary, the one who's questioning things and coming up with crazy ideas. Rachel is the one who's like boiling things down, being very practical, sticking to the facts, and can manage a lot of details when I would probably be just wandering around lost in a parking lot somewhere with all of my amazing ideas. Rachel's the one who's like, nope, Brian, the car's over here. Let's go because we have to go get to dinner and get our kids. And I would just be lost in daydream land. So, you know, as the business has grown, especially, we've really sought to hire and raise up others in our company who, you know, work well with us, but also can kind of balance out some of our weaknesses, complement some of our strengths, and that has really largely worked pretty well. But you know, I don't know that I would necessarily tout the Myers-Briggs as like the sole system to use in your company. Certainly any, you know, thing that helps you learn more about yourself and communicate better with others, by all means go for it. But there's a bunch of good ones out there. So personally, you know, of course, me being more self-improvement oriented, I am willing to take like any personality test out there to try to see what kind of clarity it provides about me and to help others understand me a little better. And if it really works and takes hold, then by all means, we have more people do it, and it's definitely beneficial. So I think even just going through the effort of trying with people on your team, especially if it's a smaller team like your specialty coffee roastery, I don't know how big you are, but I don't know, you said you're a small business owner. So, you know, or you're just working on one team. Maybe you're on a team of 5 people in a company of 5 million. You know, still could be really beneficial just with the people that you work closest with. You know, or with members of your family too. You know, some of that could be really helpful. Anybody that you're communicating with regularly and working closely with, super beneficial, whether it's Myers-Briggs or anything else. Certainly could be good to consider some of these assessments. One that we're doing more recently here is the Languages of Appreciation, which if you've ever heard of the 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So it's kind of like the work-appropriate version of that. There's no physical touch that's a love language for anybody in the workplace, generally speaking. So that one is kind of stripped out of it. But if you're familiar with the 5 love languages, it's really that in a work context. How do people feel appreciated in a work context? So we're exploring that. We're reading that as a leadership team right now. In fact, I have the book here. I did not even plan this, but I just happen to be talking about it. So this is the one that we're working on right now. Gary Chapman and Paul White, and so gives you a you know, inventory, you know, test thing that you can do to see your own. If you're curious about this one, my primary is acts of service, which suits me well as a founder of a company because I feel most appreciated when people help me get things done or do things for me. Works out great in my life. So that's pretty much what I got for you this week. My question of the week this week is going to roll right off this topic. If you've ever had Myers-Briggs, what is your Myers-Briggs and what has it done for you now that you know it? Right. So me personally, the best thing that I've learned about Myers-Briggs, the thing that sticks with me the most is the last letter. So judging or perceiving. Generally speaking, with like time management things, I've learned very specifically through the exercises we've done that I actually work best under pressure, and I will often procrastinate and wait until the last minute, not because I'm lazy or I don't care, but because it actually brings out the best in my performance. And it's the most effective way for me to operate. Now, there's a lot of downsides to doing that. But, you know, personally in my own work setting, this happens all the time. If I try to work at something, you know, 2 weeks in advance, I'll kind of frame it out and I'll get like maybe 30% there, but I just can't like really get my thoughts together on it. But if I work on it, I'm not joking, the night before or a few hours before I'm supposed to present it or really clarify it, man, it happens in like 30 minutes. It's crazy. And it's very frustrating, especially for my wife, who is basically the opposite. So it's all about knowing each other. It's all about knowing how you work. So anyway, that for me has really helped a lot. So there may be times where specifically I'll plan out only up to a certain portion, and then I'll revisit it maybe 2 days in advance to give myself at least a day buffer. Or I know if I'm going to be working closely with Rachel on something, I need to go heavy into my adaptive mode and work on it way in advance, because that will alleviate her stress. And maybe she forgives me a little bit if I procrastinate. So there you go. That's been really helpful. Hope you enjoyed this. Yeah, nice little Q&A here. It's good to be back in the saddle after taking a week off. Some of the products I talked about here are available on gouletpens.com. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to YouTube and our various other channels like Instagram and Facebook and such if you like what we do and you want to see more of it. So there you go. It's October. I can't believe it. We're going to be hitting our 10-year anniversary next month, and that is just wigging me out. I don't know what has happened to 2019. It has flown by. But I hope you enjoy the rest of your 2019, but really the rest of your week. Until next time, thanks so much for watching,